people. But I didn't know. I didn't know what that meant. Life moved on. I graduated high school. I thought I would play professional football like most kids, right? Franco did it, you know. We also grew up in a town close to, well, Willingboro, Burlington, and Mount Holly were all kind of like those sister cities. They all had their own different characters. But Carl Lewis, the track star, the great track star, ended up becoming a track star. We all grew up together in the same area. There was another gentleman ended up hanging out with us in Burlington. We used to have hot rods and we'd hang out on Friday night. He never raised his hot rod. All he would ever do is play his trumpet. And his whole thing was, I'm going to play with Stevie someday. And we're like, oh man, you're never going to play with Stevie Wonder. It's like, no, I'm going to play with Stevie someday. And all the persons related to that person's related to that person. So it became a spider web as well.
Hmm.
So it was a lot. And I could see why people would leave. But I thought, well, this is a challenge. I'm not going to let this beat me.
How long did you stay there?
I stayed there 3 years, and I would have stayed longer, but I got another opportunity. I thought I was going to stay at Miller until I was done. But see, in my mind, I was still in the corporate world. Coming from the Miller.
They have enough. They don't need to have more attention.
Right.
And the person that says they're a billionaire is probably just told you they're not.
Yeah. Yeah. And interesting, as a side note, interestingly, you said my wife loved her to death, and she's a triathlete, she's an accountant, she owns a small accounting company, but she's always like, but when she becomes that person who's in the water or riding her bike, she blossoms. And she needed a new bike recently. And those bikes are very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
But she became she was diagnosed type 1 diabetic 2 years ago. So she's had to learn to change her lifestyle. She's still athletic. She has a pump now. Things are a lot better. There's still good days and bad days. But without it, she would not be here. But she met a couple of ladies at a training camp, I want to say a year ago. For whatever reason,
Welcome to the Dr. Smiley Show. We are so excited to have yet another amazing guest, a person I met at a mastermind, author, a speaker, and this is good old Randy Powell. Gosh, Randy, we haven't seen each other in a while, but thank you so much for sending your book and also for just staying in touch from the mastermind. We owe our friendship and relationship and I guess our awakening to Craig Duswalt. Rock your life.
absolutely.
How'd you meet Craig?
It's interesting. I first knew of Craig. I hadn't met him because I'm an old Toastmaster, and he was at one of the District 12 events, and he was speaking, and I had not been a part of that event. I was at another breakout, but I happened to walk past the room when he was speaking, and his voice and his energy just caught my ear. So I stopped and I'm standing in the hallway and I'm looking at this guy. And then later, I decided, I'm going to find out who this Craig Duswalt guy is. So I started following him, and the next thing you know, I started going to a few of his events as a spectator, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Had no intention of, long-term following him or anything. There was an attraction. There was something about him, the energy and what he was saying and so forth, and how he seemed to care for people. And one thing led to another, and he noticed that, Craig doesn't forget a person's name.
No.
He makes everyone feel comfortable like he's known them forever. And he said to me one day, "Oh, you need to come to my mastermind." And I'm like, "I don't know." And so finally he said, "No, I'm serious. Come up here. We're gonna have a grand time. You're going on this beautiful golf course, blah, blah, blah." So I ended up driving to LA, northern LA. And of course, this was 10 years ago. So in my mind, I had to be dressed. I was in a three-piece suit. I pulled up to the pearly gates. I remember the golf course had these gigantic gates and beautiful green grass, and it was so well manicured. And the guard looked at it and he signed me in and I drove through. And then I got up to the parking lot and I see this beautiful clubhouse. I walk in the doors and instantly I see Craig with his feet up on the conference table. He had just come off playing the first 9 holes and he was as relaxed and comfortable. And all of a sudden, I got really nervous because here I am all dressed up and here he is just laid back and, doing his thing. And so he said, "Come on in, Randy, come on in." So that's how I met him. And it's an interesting story because he was going through the let's call it what is that, with the hot seat. And while he was going through the hot seat, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I'm just a guest. Now, mind you, before that, before the mastermind got started, I went to the men's room and of course I loosened up my tie and took off my jacket, rolled up my sleeves and tried to bring it down a little bit. So we're sitting there and they're going through the hot seat and they get to me and I'm next to Craig, but he's at the head of the table and he looks at me and he says, "You're up." And I said, "Huh?" He said, "You're up." And at that point in time, I was just starting to figure out who I was. And I said, "Okay." And I don't even remember the googly glob that came out of my mouth because I had no clarity. I had no sense of purpose. It just wasn't there. But I had this desire to be more than I was. And when it got all done, they were firing things off at me, and he looks at me, and he's the last one to speak, and he says, "Randy, all you need to do is get out of your own way." And it took me a year. I drove home 68, 70 miles that day. I'm driving home, and it's killing me because I did not understand what he was saying to me. I slept on it. I talked with my wife about it. I just couldn't figure it out. So I kept studying, kept working towards trying to figure out who I am. And then it took a year and I finally got there. And so I credit Craig with being the person that says, all you got to do is get out of your own way. You've got the tools, you've got everything you need. You just need to step back and let it happen. That's
That's
how I met Craig.
that's a great story, and that really speaks volumes of who he is, but also what his relationship is to his database. In other words, everyone has a database. Do you
Yeah.
know who's in it? And how well do you know who's in it? And he is someone that really cares about the people he meets, putting them in a database, and then maintaining not just
Hmm.
the communication, but the evolution of that conversation. I didn't have the same exact circumstance, but I will tell you, once I got in this database and I saw him in a couple of events, I do relate to what you're talking about. And he is he's a champion at understanding exactly what you're talking about, is that he has a mastermind, and you and I are
Hmm.
both part of that mastermind, and his
Yes.
mastermind is filled with people that are super talented and are doing great things in the world,
Hmm.
and they don't need to be in a mastermind, but they want to be bigger and better than what they
Right.
are. I noticed you didn't put the science of getting stuck, you put the science of getting unstuck.
Unstuck.
And I also noticed you have two doors behind you. So one is the stuck door, the other one's the unstuck door.
There you go. You got to remember which one you're going through.
That's right. That's right. So we're gonna take the audience back. And by the way, Craig, thank you so much for the people that you bring and attract to the mastermind. How you take care of them, but how you encourage them to get together and learn about each other and support each other. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
and just to be clear, I wouldn't know you if it wasn't for the multiple times I've seen you at his masterminds. And I think we met maybe 5 years ago, is my guess.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
So, Randy, I like to start at the beginning because we can go anywhere when we start as a kind of a gratitude. But where were you born? What was your childhood like? And what was in your childhood that caused you to be this beautiful person, but also this kind of stuck person?
Well, I was born in Boston, although I've never had an accent. And to top it off, I grew up in South Jersey, uh, which I've never had an accent.
Hey, do you 1 second here? That's so cool. So we're both New Englanders, but I want to say, remember at the beginning of the show, I was grabbing my Monster, and I said, "Oh, I just met the people from Monster and Liquid Death," and you go, "Oh yeah, I've met them because of Craig." So the last thing I want to say is, you can meet some people that you just could never get to. And Craig
That's
brings
right.
some of the coolest people. So you were born in Boston, no accent. How is that possible?
I don't have a clue. But, born in Boston, I think probably the reason I don't have a Bostonian accent is because as a Army brat, we moved from Fort Devens, Massachusetts to Fort Dix, New Jersey, which is an Army training center, a huge Army training center. And
Huge.
I grew up in a little town called Mount Holly, New Jersey, right off exit 5, the Turnpike exit 5. But I never picked up a Jersey accent either, although I recognize accents from back east very easily because of my growing up there. Yeah, I actually went to the same high school. Many of our listeners and viewers may or may not remember Franco Harris, the football star, Pittsburgh Steelers.
Oh yeah.
Well, Franco went to the same high school. He was a few years ahead of us. We Sports was a big thing where not only back in the day, it's always been a big thing for keeping young boys out of trouble
Hmm.
and keeping them organized and thinking right and on the right path. My mom was divorced at an early age for me. I have an older brother who passed away when I was 14. He was 21,
How
and
how old were you at that
I was
time?
14 when my oldest brother passed away, and my mom had already been divorced
I see.
for years.
3 years. Okay.
And I have a younger brother, and he's 5 or 6 years younger than me. He was the little skinny runt, and so as soon as my oldest brother passed away, because there was no other man in the house, that was my job. That became my job. I became my brother's protector and my mom's protector. She worked two jobs, sometimes even three, to make sure that we had everything we wanted. We didn't grow up wealthy or anything like that, but we had everything we wanted. We had all the necessities. I was able to play sports. In those days, most of the equipment, not like now, parents have to buy all their equipment. The schools gave us all the equipment. We
Mhm.
might have to buy our spikes if we wanted special spikes or something like that for football. But I was involved in track. Football was my love. And it was a great community because I went to a regional high school, Rancocas Valley Regional High School in Mount Holly. And because we were close to McGuire Air Force Base and Fort Dix, people from all over the world, obviously, mixed marriages, people came together, because of the military. So it was definitely a melting pot of different cultures and peoples and that sort of thing. So, that was early 70s. I graduated from eighth grade or from high school in 73, and eighth grade was my first graduation. My oldest brother at the time was into digital computers. He was on the leading edge of digital computers. So he worked in New York and he was engaged to get married. And he came to my eighth grade graduation. And my brother always said to me, always keep your word. You make a promise, keep your promise. And he was my big brother. He was my best friend. He was like my father. He was the influencer. He was all those things wrapped up in one. And he was a hard studier. He wasn't real smart. He studied late at night all the time to get to where he was. So he had this great job and he came down for graduation and he had on these really cool shoes. I'll never forget them. I was 14. I saw these shoes from New York City. And he promised me, he said, I'll get you a pair, I'll send them to you. And a week went by, the shoes had come. Another week went by, the shoes weren't there. And it just so happens that me and the guys were up at the little plaza above the hill where the pizza parlor, that was our hangout. And as I was coming home, I noticed all these cars around. And I'm like, what is going on? My mom didn't say she was having anything going on. And I walk in, and at the time, my mother was dating a flight engineer. And his nickname was Stack. His name was James Towns. Really cool dude. And he snatched me up and took me out back and sat me in his 67 T-Bird. And I didn't really understand what was going on because it happened so fast. He had his flight suit on. We get in the car and he looks at me and says, son, I got something to tell you. And you're going to have to stay in the car with me a while because when we go back in the house, it's going to be real important that you go in with the right mind. So I looked at him like, what is he saying to me? And he looked at me and he said, Kenny passed away. That's my brother. Took me a few minutes to really get my thoughts wrapped around what he was telling me. It was like I was in this daze and I looked at him and he was serious. And I just remember saying, no, not my brother, not my brother. And he looked at me and said, let it out, son. Let it out. So about, I don't know if it was 15, 20 minutes, half hour, whatever it was, it seemed like it was forever. So he said, you ready to go inside? And I said, yeah. So I went up. My mom was upstairs. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. But I stayed with her all night in the room. Slept on the floor. The next day, she seemed to be okay. And we made it through that. The reason the shoes never came is because my brother passed away from a brain hemorrhage in his sleep. Came home from work, laid down, and his fiance went to get him some aspirin because he said he had a horrible headache and he never woke up. So he didn't suffer. He didn't suffer. But that imprint of never making a promise you don't expect to keep and stay with me. In addition to that, my mom always took in young men off the street that were going the wrong way. And she would take care of them, she would nurture them, and the next thing you know, they were doing well. And I said, someday I'm going to be able to do that, help people. But I didn't know what that meant. Life moved on. I graduated high school. I thought I would play professional football like most kids, right? Franco did it, you know. We also grew up in a town close to, well, Willingboro, Burlington, and Mount Holly were all kind of like those sister cities. They all had their own different characters. But Carl Lewis, the track star, the great track star, ended up becoming a track star. We all grew up together in the same area. There was another gentleman ended up hanging out with us in Burlington. We used to have hot rods and we'd hang out on Friday night. He never raised his hot rod. All he would ever do is play his trumpet. And his whole thing was, I'm going to play with Stevie someday. And we're like, oh man, you're never going to play with Stevie Wonder. It's like, no, I'm going to play with Stevie someday. And every time you saw him, he was playing his horn, playing notes. Just, he never raced his car. But guess what? One day he ended up recruiting the gang. And later he ended up achieving his dream. That's when I realized you never rain on anybody's parade. So all these lessons, as kids, we don't know. As teenagers, as young men and women, we don't know what we don't know. But those lessons that we learn through life stick with us. So when I add all that up, I decided there's a way to serve that I can do because I loved airplanes. So I went into the Air National Guard. So I worked at McGuire Air Force Base for years as a civil service employee and also a weekend warrior, as they call them. I got a chance. I always wanted to go to California. Always dreamed of the beach and sunny palm trees and the warm breezes. Now, I didn't know enough to know there's also bad weather sometimes, but I ended up having an opportunity to move to California. I took vacation on my own because I found out that there was a unit at Ontario International Field right then, but they were moving to March Air Base initially or at some point. And I knew they were getting F4s, and I had a lot of experience on F4 Phantom fighters. I went in as a jet engine mechanic and came out as a safety and environmental coordinator. So with that said, I came out to California and I put in an application to come to California, and they hired me within a week. So that was in September. Well, I came here in July on vacation to ask about the job, to kind of sort of let them see me and get to know me. And I acted as like, oh, I'm just here on vacation. I just wanted to stop by and say hello. And really, I wanted to introduce myself. I wanted them to know that I had the experience, I had the personality, I had the leadership skills. Just give me a shot. Within a week or so, the supervisor called me up. He said, hey, his nickname was Mule. He said, hey, are you still interested in coming to California? I said, absolutely. So September of that year, and my birthday is September 1st, in 82, I moved to California. I moved to Riverside, California. And then I retired in 1995 from the from civil service, or I'm sorry, from the reserves, which was part of civil service. So I had to give up my civil service. I had to make a decision. Do I stay in civil service for 45 years, or do I go ahead and go into private industry, but get my 20 plus years? And I wanted to have my military retirement. So I stayed till 22 years, retired in 95 as a master sergeant, even though I was in a chief slot. If I had stayed a little longer, but I knew I wasn't working there and I was holding someone else from being promoted to chief, senior, and then chief. So I went ahead and left. I left because I had a number of reasons. I needed to free the spot up for another man, so I wouldn't hold him up. But I also had an opportunity to go to Northrop. So I went to work on some special programs, what we call uh, Special Projects Division in Hawthorne, California, on some, let's call it programs that we don't talk about, right? So I did that for a little while. That was exciting. And then I finished up in Palmdale on the B2, did some things up there with that. And then I was at a safety meeting, a conference, American Society of Safety Engineers meeting, and I met this man, and he said, hey, have you ever heard of Fleetwood? You should come work with us. And I said, Fleetwood? No, I don't know what. Well, Fleetwood is the largest manufacturer of motorhomes and travel trailers, and we're right there in Riverside, California, and you live close by. And I'm like, okay. And I interviewed with Fleetwood 5 times. The fifth time, I almost didn't go. I'm like, they're just pulling my leg, they're just being, whatever. And I almost decided not to show up. Something said, go ahead and go. And I was hired, and I worked at the corporate office there in Riverside, California, which is, I was hired as a senior safety engineer. So they gave me the highest position that they had in the safety engineering realm. And I traveled all over the United States, including Canada, to our manufacturing centers. And that was a pretty awesome job. And it was a great company. It wasn't, it was a $3.5 billion company. Unfortunately, 10 years after I left, they broke the company up because of a lot of different mistakes that the company made. Hard to imagine a Fortune 500 being broken apart, but it did happen. But at the time,
What was their mistakes that you think they made?
well, they brought in a lot of people that they did not have the experience in the RV industry. The
Hmm.
RV industry, whether it's motorhomes or travel trailers, was a very particular industry. And you had to understand not only the customers, but what the customers were looking for. Duh, obviously, you know. Um, but the company was organized in a way that was just beautifully put together. So and it had a lot of different pieces to the puzzle. The main two pieces was manufactured housing and the RV group. The RV group, if you break it into the two divisions, it was travel trailer division and the motorhome division. Travel trailers being towables, motorhomes having engines, right?
Hmm.
Manufactured homes, which most of the manufactured home industry, the centers, the facilities where they built them were mostly in the Southeast. But when the economy was hit, when the gas prices were really high, motorhome sales would go down a little, travel trailer sales would go down, but housing seemed to balance it out and go up. So it was this teeter-totter thing where the company was always doing well. It was in business 44 years and had never gone in the red.
Mm.
In addition to that, Fleetwood had its own credit corporation. They had no retail centers. They would finance the motorhomes and travel trailers. So they had their own credit corporation. They had their own subsidiary units, fiberglass and wood. So up in Utah, we built a lot of the frames for the motorhomes. This was before it went to aluminum framing. And then we had outside sales. So the company had a lot going on outside of the main income producing areas as well. So it was just
Hold
an
on a second.
interesting
So they were
balance.
built, how were they built before the aluminum?
Wood, before fiberglass and all that, it was
Right.
all wood framed.
That
Yeah.
that seems so long ago.
Yeah. It was a long time ago. Yeah.
But that's
And
when they were thriving. And was it the
they were
shift?
thriving in the early 80s and 90s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Oh, yeah. They
Yeah, they
were
were
rock.
everywhere. I guess you had a lot of your friends saying, "Hey, hook me up."
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And the interesting thing too was when the day you got hired, you were vetted 100%. So your retirement was instantly, and they would put 15% of your quarterly gross into the retirement plan.
Hmm.
Also, they had quarterly bonuses, and the average quarterly bonus was about 15%, sometimes 12%, low as 12% people would go, oh, it's not a good quarter. Well, actually, it was a good quarter because sometimes it was 22, 23%. And if you think about 23% on your quarterly gross and you're getting paid well,
Yeah.
that's a pretty good bonus. There were people who would go out and buy a car just because of their quarterly bonus was great.
Right.
So it was really good company. It was fun traveling, but there came a point in time where I saw a lot of changes happening. And so,
And what year was that approximately?
oh gosh, I left there probably in, I want to say 90 something, 90, 91, somewhere back in there.
And so that's when it started becoming tumultuous, little
Yeah.
unpredictable.
Yeah. And a lot of the uh, senior managers and leaders who had already become millionaires were starting to retire and move on. A lot of them went up to Whidbey Island and all up in there. I worked for a gentleman, the vice president of RV Group, Eldon John, and he retired. The Glenn Coomer, the president of the company, he retired. So you could just see the migration going out and then others coming in, and the ones that were coming in. So I had the opportunity to go to Miller Brewing Company.
Well, before you do that, if you had become the CEO of that company at that time, obviously you would have not allowed some of these changes to happen. I mean, it sounds like
No,
you had too much wisdom, too many chiefs that knew how to keep the company weather the storm, I guess, so to speak. And
absolutely.
you didn't have enough of that experience. And so you started having people that had new ideas that aren't so bad, but they weren't actually tested. And so
They
they,
weren't tested and they didn't seem to want to take time to learn about the industry. In addition to that, Glenn Coomer's parting words, actually, it might have even been the founder of the company, but I think Glenn shared with people at the time not to go into the retail business. Well, there was a few years there where some of the competition, like National RV and others, were starting to go into retail, have their own centers. Fleetwood made the mistake of doing the same thing, and then they got themselves in trouble
what kind of trouble?
financially.
I understand, but how does going into retail? It sounds like the natural thing to do in a way.
Yeah, see, that's right. It seemed like the natural thing to do, but it wasn't because Fleetwood already had a proven record of taking their products, delivering, financing them, and delivering them straight to the customer.
It's like Tesla.
Huh? Yeah, exactly. Yep. So the system was proven, and they went to change a major part of the system. And so that coupled with inexperience and some of the other things that they were doing, just over time got them in trouble.
Understood. And then you went to Miller, and then you went to
Yeah.
Miller.
So I
Miller
went to
around
Miller
90,
Brewing
90
Company.
ish, 95.
Yep, somewhere in there. Went to Miller Brewing Company. And actually, when I got to Miller, I was hired to, I've always wanted to manage more than one department. at Fleetwood, even though safety and environmental wasn't technically my department, I had a safety and environmental affairs manager over me. I was the influencer. I was the one that brought in new ideas. We hired safety coordinators at all of the facilities. That was one of my brainchilds. So quarterly meetings with the senior vice presidents in the different regions was part of my idea to keep the compensation rates down and the strategies. So
Well,
get
let me cut in here. So you went from recreational vehicles to brewing,
I
and
did.
so it was funny. I was thinking, what would it change? What are the odds that you went from that to trucking and you went with Mack trunking? If you went with Mack trucking, you would have gone from Fleetwood to Mack. Fleetwood Mac would have been.
Fleetwood Mac.
Hey, that's why I would have loved that.
Yep, absolutely. That would have been really cool. And then I could have introduced him to some people. But yeah, so I ended up going to Miller as a safety and security manager at the Irwindale Brewery, right off the 210 heading towards Pasadena. Although I lived in Riverside, it was a long drive, so I ended up moving closer. I moved to Chino Hills, which cut the drive down to about 20, 30 minutes at the most, even in horrific traffic. So that was a blessing. And Miller was a really good company. I had a blast. However, it was very challenging, much more challenging than Fleetwood. Um, Miller Brewing at the time I was there had 750 employees. It was a 24/7 operation, and they had five unions.
Wow, five unions, and I can
Five,
imagine there was a lot more competition.
five unions. And every union contract had its, let's call it, its dimensions. And I worked for a really sharp lady. She was the HR manager, and she really laid it out there. She was sharp. However, in order for her to operate the way she operated and manage all of those union contracts, she had a good HR team, but there was a lot of finagling going on under the sheets, so to
Hmm.
speak, constantly. So imagine being responsible for three departments. I had the safety engineers under me, I had health services under me, and I had security under me. At the time I had a direct report security. We had 23 or 24 officers. I had two nurses, a doctor or two doctors, and then I had four engineers, all of them experts in different variations of the operation, but all in different unions too,
Oh boy,
part of different unions.
right.
And so I had to go there. And by the way, I didn't find this out till after I took the job, but they had gone through three safety and security managers within 3 years. So I didn't know that till I went there. So the first 6 months was just proving and showing up so that my team realized I'm actually going to be there. I wasn't going to be gone in 6 months.
Why did the other ones leave so quick? What was the issue?
The stress of the job.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a lot to do, a lot to keep up with. And like I said, five unions, it was tough. It was tough. So I had a mentor there who had been there for 30 years. And she took me under her wing and she really showed me the ropes on how to manage, not lead, but manage some of the internal workings and how to work with some of the union shop stewards and negotiate to get things done. For example, one of my guys who was a bottler could only do certain tasks. So, as the safety and security manager, if I needed him to do X, he might say, "Oh, I can't do that, Randy,"
Hmm.
because he's stepping on someone else's toes. So, just daily tasks, you had to get it in your head who could do what and how could you get around that. And all of that had to do with dealing with the unions.
Boy, that sounds
Just
like
that. That's a monster just dealing with that.
yeah, that sounds like a game board that is very intricate with moves you can make.
Yeah. And then the power grabbing. There, unfortunately, there's a lot of power grabbing amongst managers. And in addition to that, there was a lot of nepotism because there were a lot of people who had been there for many years making really good incomes. And then they would get their nephews, nieces, and all that in. But you wouldn't necessarily know that somebody way over that side of the facility who you had to straighten out, so to speak, was related to somebody way over here. And you wonder, why am I having problems over here? Because this person was upset with following the rules and the regulations and whatever they were whatever they got in trouble for, so to speak. That uncle over here or auntie over here is upset, and you don't even know it until it comes up to the surface and somebody says, "Oh, that person's related to that person's related to that person." So it became a spider web as well.
Hmm.
So it was a lot, and I could see why people would leave. But I thought, well, this is a challenge. I'm not going to let this beat me.
How long did you stay
And
there?
I stayed there 3 years, and I would have stayed longer, but I got another opportunity. I thought I was going to stay at Miller until I was done. But see, in my mind, I was still in the corporate world. Coming from the military civil service, transitioning into the corporate world, I was still in that mindset. I'm going to retire here and that's going to be it. I didn't realize there was life after corporate. Nobody ever taught me that.
Right.
You know, how some people come up and they're entrepreneurs and business owners because of their environment and their influence and all that. Mine was you work for a living, you work for somebody else. That mindset hadn't switched yet. So I left Miller Brewing Company after accomplishing everything that I wanted to accomplish. So I know that we were better off when I left. And I went and only because I got a phone call one day and it was a recruiter and he said, "Hey, Randy, we've been following you. We've got your information, blah, blah, blah. Wouldn't you like to play golf whenever you wanted? Would you like to have your own schedule, make your own schedule?" And I thought, okay, come on, who is this? Next thing I know, I ended up going to this NASDAQ traded company. And it was great for about, well, I would say about 6, 7 years. The founder of the company passed away. And again, a shakeup again. And it just wasn't meant to be. I ended up being hired by the founder and CEO of the company, president and CEO. And when he passed away, slowly but surely things started changing to the point where it was time for me to go. And I say time for me to go, and that's where I pick it up in my book. It wasn't actually time for me to go. I actually was fired. I used to not be able to say that years ago, but it was the best thing. It's kind of funny because when it happens to you, you're not there. Trust me. I was depressed, downhearted, you name it. I'm like, I had a perfect set of careers, all 5 different industries, done well in every one of them. And all of a sudden, over the age of 50, here I am. What's going on? Like Marvin Gaye would say. And I had to figure it all out. And for the first 6 months, I was depressed. I was hurt, all the things. And it's not that I had never let anybody go before as a manager, leader. That happens. It's not that I'd never empathized about people losing their jobs. Of course I had. But just like anything, it's always different when it happens to you. When you can feel it rather than just sit back and observe it, it makes a huge difference.
Hmm.
And so I never wanted to feel that again, but I also never wanted to, let's say, have someone else experience if I could help it. So I left this company shockingly, rode around town trying to figure out how am I going to tell my wife and my kids that They were older, but how am I going to tell them, yeah, your dad got fired. Your dad lost his job. He's got his last check there, et cetera, et cetera. The blessing, I had many blessings. One of them was I had already been a Toastmaster for several years. I had already had a world-renowned coach, Cheryl Roush, who is an accredited speaker in Toastmasters. And I had already been talking, speaking, sharing, learning, but not coaching. And so it was a little easier once I got my head on straight from what had happened to me and stopped feeling sorry for myself. It was a little easier for me because I had the support of my wife, my family, really close friends, and Toastmasters. And because I had that rock to stand on, I didn't drown.
So you started the show off with you came to a resort and met Craig Duswalt. How close were we to that spot?
Let's see. This was in 2013
Oh,
that
two
I
years
actually lost
later.
my job.
2015 is when you met Craig. Is that correct?
And yeah, in 2015 is when I met
I felt
Craig.
it was getting close because it sounded like you were finding your identity to where your real superpower was.
Yeah, I was looking. I
Yeah.
didn't know what I was looking for. And
You know, you were lucky though, Randy. I mean, not you were lucky. You are fortunate because some people spend their whole life and they don't know to
oh,
find it.
absolutely.
And they
Absolutely.
and some people are looking their whole life, but other people don't know they're supposed to find it. Um, I just want to make a quick tangent that
Sure.
I thought I was who I was supposed to be for some 40 years as an entrepreneur in the entertainment world, doing weddings of all things. And my mom gets Alzheimer's, and here I am, a caregiver. What a jolt to the system.
Oh.
And then for 3 years later, she passes, and I do my first book.
Mm-hmm.
So you can imagine that many decades and not knowing that's not my path, or that, but it was all leading to the fact that how important events were.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why when I met you at an event, I'm at my natural self.
Yeah.
And I want to show a picture of you when I met you because we're not exactly there, but I want to intercede that I met you, and because of your smile, because of your
Oh.
demeanor, and because you had found so much comfort in the mastermind, you were at peace at the time I
Yes.
met you. So we're not talking about 2015. We're talking about, I think it was closer to 2020 as my guess. But here, I want to show this to the audience real quick. I mean, that, and by the way, this book here, I mean, this picture has been in several books, and I just want to give you a quick update of to since we've complimented the mastermind, we've complimented Craig. I just want to give a quick update of one more thing. This is
Keep smiling.
that's the Rock Your Life, and I wanted to show you. There's Craig, but
Yeah.
these are our friends,
Yes.
and I'm going to go through it real quickly.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine. Yep.
Here you
Yeah.
are, but
Oh,
you remember these people.
I do.
And so, just so you know, Randy, I think you're in 4 books of mine.
Oh, wow.
You're in, I think, a speaker
Awesome.
book. You're in a Black History book. You're in Rock Your Life book. Anyway, I just want to have a little commercial break, saying that as you're
Yeah.
getting close to the time that we met, what a what an evolution. And I want to take us time to say how important that evolution is, specifically at the time you're talking about in your story, because some people could go the depression route, some people could go the quit route, and some people could just settle route. But
Yeah.
you when you said you went to that golf course, I want the audience to hear what a pivotal step up that was to say, I don't know what I'm doing, but I want to find out.
Yeah. And Craig's heard the story, of course. I've told it in public, and in fact, I told it in Ventura when we were together. But and only for, he. What's interesting about really great people is that they don't really toot their own horn. I don't know what it is about some really. I've had the blessing of being around some awesome people. You, Craig, uh, James, it's just so James Barber, just so many different people. And people locally too in my
Okay.
community. Three ladies in my book, they're just superstars. But they never talk about themselves. And it's hard for me when people say, well, Randy, I don't really know you that well. I've heard that so many times. I've started saying, okay, I gotta start talking about myself. So I think people know me, but they don't really know me. but it's hard to talk about yourself because I get so much fulfillment out of helping, working with, coaching, seeing other people get the thing that they need and want and should have and and deserve. That's really good enough for me. I mean, we're in business, so of course we want to get paid for our services. But beyond that, it's the getting it done and seeing other people not only happy, smile. I've had people in my office just break down and start crying because of some of the things that they've gone through, and we have to get through that stuff. And I tell them it's okay. I've been there, it's okay. I have a box of Kleenex right here, But once we get through all that, all the gremlins in the past, and I've had to work through mine. And we don't work through them and get rid of them. We work through them to convince them to get on our side rather than be against us. You never get rid of them,
Well,
you know?
I think there's a real synonymous relationship with the words humility and gratitude and abundance. And
Yep.
when you take a person like Craig or yourself or James Barber and you look at those adjectives describing them,
Mhm.
they have enough. They don't need to have more attention.
Right.
And the person that says they're a billionaire is probably just told you they're not.
Yeah. 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 And, interesting, as a side note, interestingly, you said my wife, love her to death, and always, she's a triathlete. She's an accountant. She owns a small accounting company, but she's always like, but when she becomes that person who's in the water or riding her bike, she blossoms. And she needed a new bike recently. And those bikes are very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
But she was diagnosed type 1 diabetic 2 years ago. So she's had to learn to change her lifestyle. She's still athletic. She has a pump now. Things are a lot better. There's still good days and bad days, but without it, she would not be here. But she met a couple of ladies at a training camp, I want to say a year ago. For whatever reason, they've really taken to her. And these ladies, I won't mention their names, they live in Rancho Santa Fe. If you know anything about Rancho Santa Fe, which is just south of Temecula in San Diego County, there's a lot of wealth there. And she recently was invited to a party, ladies' party, an evening get together, and some of the top athletes. And she knows of some of them, but one of the ladies just sold her a bike and really gave her an awesome deal on this bike. She's so happy with this bike, and she goes to this party and she sees that there's other athletes there that she admires and they're so down to earth. And the two ladies that took to her, my wife says to me, honey, I don't know, I'm not in their circle, I'm not in their level athletically. We certainly don't have money like they have, but they just engulfed me with love and care and treated me like I'm like belong there and all this. I don't understand it. I said, because they're good people, honey, because they're just good people. And they see you're a good person. And that's really, how I look at it. And so like you're saying, a lot of people put people on pedestals. We've all done it. I've done it. Everyone is human and everyone is a person. You just happen to be somewhere that I'm not, and that's okay. You have to be able to be okay with who you are, where you are. And if you have a goal to move on and do better or do the bigger, then we're all for that too.
So I wanted to just bring up a couple points in this book.
Mhm.
I want to make sure we cover some things in this conversation.
Absolutely.
You've been very rich about sharing a lot of details about how you create who you are, and that's
Mhm.
without that story, it's hard to grasp how much work you've done on yourself. So thank you for that. But I want to move into the book, what you're doing now, and some of the recommendations and gold nuggets. So
Sure.
one of the chapters I liked that stood out was the ROI of success in winning the game.
Mhm.
I wanted you to talk about that, but I wanted you to pick about maybe two other gold nuggets from this book. So we give three, and this is obviously on Amazon. And you know, you buy a book from a man like Randy. you're getting just a tremendous amount of download from his mind, from his heart, and he's a coach. He wants you to win. So this is a big deal. The science of getting unstuck. Like, just can't express enough that it's a very high percentage. I wouldn't be surprised if 75-80% of people are stuck.
Hmm.
And so you have some very valuable information here. I would like you to talk about that particular chapter. It doesn't matter what order, but if you can give three gold nuggets from this, that way you choose two and I chose one.
Sure. So when I talk about the return of investment, that's when we think about the return of investment, we typically think about it from a financial perspective. And unfortunately, I just had this conversation yesterday with a coaching client. We have a tendency to always measure or compare ourselves to someone else or ourselves to where we are based on the numbers.
Right.
Value, for example. We were talking about value the other day, and I tried to persuade this individual to understand that his value is not measured in numbers or money or what he can get as a fee for his services. The return on his investment, because he was held back, and so much that he now he wants to talk about self-care, how important it is to take care of your internal, your spirit. And I said to him, the return on your investment is going to be the freedom that you get when you get there first, because you're working your way through it, but you're not there yet. You're still struggling with it. How wonderful is it going to be when the return on the investment and the time, the seat time, the self-study, the reflection, when you can stand up and actually be so proud of who you are and love yourself so much
Hmm.
that you can turn around now and give back freely to other people. I told him, I shared a story with him. I said, because of the way I grew up, well, I didn't grow up in the ghetto, but we were close to the lower end of town. My mom was gone a lot because she worked two and three jobs sometimes, mostly two, but every once in a while she would take on a third job. I had the job of taking care of my brother, but I would get in the mirror and I would look at myself because I knew somehow that if I didn't tell myself I loved me, that it was going to be hard. I knew my mother loved me. And I told this gentleman, I said, I would literally get in the movie or in front of the mirror, playing around and say, I love me some Randy Powell and kiss myself in the mirror just to build my own self up,
Okay.
you know? And so the return on that investment was I was able to hold my chin up and recognize that I am unique, I am special. I don't know what I have yet, right? Because I was too young to understand, but I knew that I was special and unique. And I said to him, that's your return on investment. That was the return on investment for me, just kissing myself in the mirror, because it allowed me to keep my chin up. This was in the day when a lot of people were saying, you aren't this, you aren't that. Without us going into detail, you'll never be this, you'll never be that. I had a guidance counselor in high school that told me, well, your GPA or scores, you're not going to be able to do this or that. It's not true. And it's even in the book. I talk about letting other people get in the way and they get inside your head and you're pre-programmed to fail. And we have to shed that. So the return on that investment was not financial. I think when I'm speaking about the return on investment, I'm talking about all the things that make life worth living that are non-financial, that don't include measuring numbers, such as how do you feel when you actually see someone, for example, how proud do you feel when you see someone graduating? How proud do you feel when you see someone you've coached or worked with or helped or lend a hand to who makes it out of a bad place? Those feelings, because we can't take money with us. We can't take nice cars with us. We can't do any of those things and take them with us. that all stays here. And the truth is, it crumbles and rusts and falls apart over time. But what you do have is on the spiritual side, you do have the power of loving, of caring for, and knowing that you had an impact and it wasn't financial. And there's so many wonderful words that can describe the impact, and
Man,
it's non-financial.
I am so blown away because I was feeling certain words come to me, and you started just blending those words as if we were like this. Okay. And I want to throw this at you because, you know, how many books have you done? This is,
I've been a part, this is my signature
this is your
book.
signature book, right?
My first one was Safety Has No Quitting Time. And I've been a part of Craig's books.
Yep.
And then I wrote the forward in another book that just became Faces of Safety, that just became an Amazon bestseller. And that gentleman I met on LinkedIn and we became friends. And he was a Fed OSHA guy for many years. Then he did safety consulting and now he's getting ready to retire and he wants to promote that book and speak on that subject of safety.
Well, isn't it funny? This chapter could be an hour conversation by itself because
Yeah.
what I'm getting from this, and I'm so glad I picked this particular topic to talk about, is the concern people have with ROI. They sometimes miss the joy.
Mhm.
And if you take the I of income out and replace it with impact, impact is actually enjoyment. The more
Yes,
impact you have in life, the more you're getting it back through abundance, through all kinds of other
I
things.
agree.
And I want to say that when you are ROI income, you are in that conversation possibly of comparison. And
Yes,
you're looking at how much I'm making, how much they're making, kind of thing. And comparison, as you know, is the thief of joy. Now,
yes.
what's interesting, you take that I out of there and you replace it with the I of impact or the I of inspiration. Okay. Or just put an L there, ROL,
Love.
love. Okay. Then what you're talking about is actually living.
Yes.
And man, what a powerful chapter. I mean, Randy, I could see your name up here, maybe a black book with ROI and it just like, and have it income impact.
We might
By
have to
the way,
do
you know,
something
I
like
love impact. You know, I
that.
love impact.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Well,
Well, we have
it
plenty of time, but I want to make sure we divide this time into a couple other goal points because we don't need to give away the whole book. This book is worth buying. Go to Amazon and get it.
yes.
And by the way, how do people reach you to get to conversate with you about potentially coaching them or to hire you as a speaker?
Well, everything I do from my mastermind to live events to webinars is all on my homepage of my website because when they go to randypowellspeaks.com, I want them to be able to see everything right on the homepage. And then if they want to go further and learn more about me and all that, that's great. I'm updating the website because recently I have decided to narrow my niche. Not that I don't work with other people, but I'm really finding that most of my clients, most of the coaching, most of the people that I've been working with for the last 2 to 3 years have been women in their 50s and 60s.
Hmm.
Women who, as I say, let's say they want to come back into the field, whatever that was. They want to start their careers over or pick up their careers because they've raised families, they've put themselves on hold, or they want to start a new business. Maybe they had a business and they let it go because of their family and they needed to pay attention and raise the kids and do those sorts of things. So women oftentimes will take a back seat. And I've learned the greatest lessons have been taught to me by women. My grandmother, my mother, my wife, the the manager I had at Northrop, my mentor at Northrop. I mean, so many women have impacted and shown me how to think differently, think outside the box, but think differently, more so than just how men think. I'm a man and I think a certain way, but I also can relate to how women think too.
Mhm.
So it brings in a dynamic, a certain sensitivity, empathy, all those things on the emotional side. Now, I can't think as fast as them, but I get them.
Right.
And so, what I'm trying to do now is make sure that I help those women do what they want to do now without the fear or worry of becoming stuck. And so I'm narrowing that niche. So I just started updating my website, randypowellspeaks.com, and in the very top of the website, it shows exactly who I'm working with. And now we're creating the content and showing it on LinkedIn, the articles I'm writing about, new videos will be coming. I'm going to be starting a YouTube channel. I'm going to be doing everything I can to make sure that if they're out there and they want to work with me, let's do it.
Well, let's hear two more gold nuggets. But before we do, I want to say it's no secret that you're attracted to Craig Duswalt's event because of technically a woman as well, his wife.
Yes,
And
Natasha.
it's evident that Craig is a big support of her success, but it's evident that they are partners in raising a family and raising a business
Hmm.
and businesses.
Absolutely.
So give me two more gold nuggets, and I have some questions for the exit of our interview.
Okay.
I think
Same
we'll.
chapter or something different?
No, I want two completely different. Why people what people get by getting this book because that's what why people buy a book. What do they get? Give me two more gold nuggets, please.
Well, they get a specific process of identifying their purpose, creating what I call the intentional mindset that pulls them through the weeds as they are not only identifying, figuring out what is it they want to do and who is it they want to become. The mindset, the intentionality behind developing that mindset creates an emotional connection to their goal or their objective or what they're trying to achieve so that they don't get caught up in the weeds. They don't let the hard times or the moments where they don't feel like it's working, they don't give up. I remember the book 3 Feet from Gold.
Oh, that's awesome.
Just before reaching, you give up. Most people don't hang in there long enough through the pain to enjoy the game. And so I've seen a lot of people give up way too early. I'm not that person.
Oh, I know you're not.
As I was remaking myself and figuring out who I was and what it is that made me help me get to where I am, I needed to be fired. I needed the time to go through all of those processes from government to military to Fortune 500s to losing a job to being a worker to being a leader in organizations to have everything that I needed to set me up to be able to get fired, get back on the horse, and have the emotional connection to figuring out what it is I want to do, and then having the intentionality to not let anything get in the way or discourage me.
Isn't it funny that you bring up a book, Sharon Lecter, Dr. Greg Reed, and their shows just dropped, I would say, weeks ago, literally weeks ago.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? What's a third gold nugget that you would like to share? I know there's so many. I mean, this is a loaded book, that's for sure.
So I
By the
think,
way, I think there's a printing mistake on here.
is
I,
it?
I don't. I'm not trying to embarrass you, but it says it's just $20. Shouldn't it be $20,000? I mean, this is given so much value.
No, no, no. I want everybody uh, to be able to have access to it. You know, I remember when I first started speaking, I was studying so many hours of Les Brown and all the greats. I remember my wife taking me to the pond in Anaheim to see what I thought was going to be Ducks game, and no, it ended up being to see Les Brown, Zig Ziglar, and all of that. And so I remember seeing them on stage and going, "There's something about that. I think I can do that." And long story short, that was one of the things, the chapters in my life that made me, uh, in the back of my mind, think that that's exciting. But I think when I wrote the book, as I followed the process that I used to get out of the woods, if you will, one of the chapters is the whole action plan, designing your own action plan. That's chapter 6. And I realized that you can have a plan. I'm a note taker. I love notes. I like checking off the box. I like having a plan written down in front of me. But if you don't have an emotional connection to the plan, as soon as something is disruptive, someone hurts your feelings, someone discourages you, or you let someone discourage you, I should say, that plan kind of slips away.
Yeah.
And I remember Tony Robbins, I loved hearing him, and he always talked about the massive action plan. And as I was going through this process and developing this process of getting out of my own way, I couldn't help but say, okay, I got to have a plan. I got to put all this stuff into a plan. But I don't agree with Tony Robbins because he said you have to have a massive action plan. I came up with this term called the PMAP, personal massive action plan. Because if it's not tied to emotionally to you, you're going to give up.
Hmm.
It's too hard. It's not easy. It's difficult. It's mind-boggling. It's confusing. And you need to be able to learn to ask for help. And if you're not doing all of that, you're going to fall, it's going to fall away. And you're not going to achieve, you're not going to become the person you want to become. And you're going to be sad and miserable, unhappy. And there are way too many unhappy people walking around on the planet.
Amen.
And so my goal in doing this was to make it clear that when you have something you want to achieve, you have to make sure you really want it and that you're emotionally connected to it so you never, ever give up. And so I came up with the term PMAP. So in the book, you'll see PMAP in my process that I coach rather than just saying you got to have a massive action plan. No, you got to have a personal massive action plan. So that structured plan teaches you a couple of things real quick. One of the things it teaches you to have a plan so you have somewhere you know where you're going. But part of that is figuring out who you need to get help from and then giving them the grace when they don't help you right away because people are busy. So the format is who do I need to contact and follow up with to help me get this next piece of the plan done? And then you document because other people are busy too. And if you are not getting response from people, there's a way, and I coach that on how to get responses so people don't forget you because it's not personal. People are busy. I give an example. I was waiting on a testimonial, waiting on a testimonial, waiting on a testimonial. And finally I said, okay, I know this gentleman wants to give me a testimonial. And when he did it, I reminded him and he did it. He did it within probably 30 minutes of me requesting it. And it was beautifully done. But you have to give people grace too. You can't take it personal. So I
100%.
think having a plan like that allows you to understand that a plan is a plan, but you have to be emotionally connected as well.
Well, I'm glad that we extended 30 minutes to this because we would have never, ever gotten all those good gold nuggets. So I do have 5 questions I exit the show with, and
Okay.
it's the rapid fire section.
Okay.
This is my way of giving the audience a tremendous amount of meat of how you programmed yourself without a tremendous amount of time. In other words, we don't have any more time. So how can we get questions answered quick? So if you could not elaborate, but just be very specific in something you say, I want to give one more example, that's fine. But real quick.
Okay. Got
Ready?
it.
Book that changed your life.
A book that changed my life. It's right here behind me. It's called The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson.
And because you have such an interesting stack there, why don't you tell me 2 other books that are up there?
The Magic of Thinking Big. Gosh, there's so many. John Maxwell is up. There's two John Maxwells up there.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah. And then The Habits of Highly Effective People.
Perfect. That's great, Randy. I just since you have such a great collection, I wanted to give a couple more shout outs.
Absolutely.
You did great. What movie inspires you?
The Wizard of Oz, my favorite all time from my childhood, and I've probably watched it 50 to 100 times.
The Man Behind the Curtain. All
That's
right.
it.
3. What song gets you going?
Oh gosh, what song gets me going? As in pumping me up?
Yeah. What song do you just love to hear? It's timeless. You'll never get tired of it.
Me and Mrs. Jones,
Isn't that a good one?
Billy Paul.
I know. I know Billy Paul. Yeah. He didn't have a whole lot of hits, but that was a heck of a song, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, who's your hero?
My okay, so I have a lot of heroes. My mother was my hero.
Name three,
My brother, my grandmother.
and give shout outs to your wife and your kids if you'd like.
Okay. My wife's name is Susan Jane Powell. She's a triathlete, an Ironman.
No elaboration, just shout outs. Just I love you. Just I
And
love you.
shout out to Neil, who's the oldest, Sean, who's the middle, Richie, the Justin's the youngest, and I have one daughter, and I call her Melvin. Her
Awesome.
nickname's Melvin, is Melissa.
I think that's one of my favorite parts of the show is seeing someone at their biggest smile say, "That's who I love. That's who I'm proud of. That's who I'm grateful for." So, who would you like to meet you haven't met?
Oh gosh, who would I like to meet that I haven't met? Pow, 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 pow. That's a tough one. Mm,
If you got two, you can say two. Come on, Randy.
there's so many.
Name three as fast as you can.
I'd like to meet Les Brown one-on-one. I've seen him on stage, listened to him
Okay, go
at
ahead. Number two,
uh, Tony Robbins would be one.
three.
I think I'd like to meet, I think I'd like to meet Obama.
Yeah, those are good. Those are good three. That's a
Yeah,
solid three. And
yeah.
I can imagine with how much you've read and how much you've been inspired, how many would be to choose from. But those are a great three. Last
Yeah.
question for you: what quote do you live by?
What quote do I live by? Oh man, do I live by? Never, ever, ever give up.
And you are certainly that person. Randy, it's been a pleasure. You said your website is
RandyPowellSpeaks.com.
that's an awesome website name. All right. Well, I'll see you at the next mastermind with Craig Duswalt. And thank you for allowing me to amplify your goodness. You certainly are a man that does not need any amplification because everywhere you go, people are like, wow, there's just so much beautiful energy coming from you.
No, I could use all the help I can get. Thank you so much, Mr. Ken Roshan. It's
All
been a
right. Well, this is the Dr. Smiley Show. You just heard from Randy Powell. Hey, you know what? This is a really unique interview because I've done over 600, and Randy really gave his time to give you details of his journey. And I just want to say, some people would hear that journey and they'd say, "Ah, so it's not too late," or "Ah, it's okay to do 20 here." And that's the thing. It doesn't matter how long. It matters when you want to awaken and how determined you are for that awakening moment. So,
oh,
Randy Powell, you are awesome. I'm so
thank
glad
you.
you're on the show, and I
Thank
look
you.
forward to this being released and inspiring lots of people. So people say, "You know, someone I want to meet, Randy Powell."
That's awesome. You take care. God bless.
Here.
Bye bye.